Well, what's up again, guys? Brian here at 3 Tower. Welcome to another episode of People's Questions, where I answer all the questions that you guys have sent me over the past week. This episode is certainly going to be shorter, I believe, which it's not a problem. But before I begin, I would like to give out a quick shout out to the 3 viewers of mine that are actually able to guess what moment in time I would time travel to. Which was May 16th, 1983, which was, of course, the day Michael Jackson revealed that he could do the moonwalk at Motown 25. Crazy moment. Would love to be there in person. I don't care how I would get in, but I would find a way to break in. And the 3 individuals I want to give out a shout out to are Cassie Day Williams, Richard Altermet, and the Immortal Super Being. So congratulations on the shout out and getting that right. The first question comes from Phantom Sidious, and you want to know, what should the story of the Phantom Pain should have been? Simply to go over the war between Big Boss and Zero. It was prime for that time period. Would have made sense for the game to end with Big Boss meeting David, which would eventually grow up to become Solid Snake. And I just think that put it like this, nothing that happened in that game affected the overall plot. You could literally take that out of the chronological order, and it gave you no information that you didn't already know. In fact, it went over a lot of things that the other games didn't even go over or even mention, and it even caused a lot of just errors. And that was like my biggest problem. I mean, the one thing that Metal Gear Solid 4 did so well was it answered all of the plot points and all the questions that had been asked over the franchise. This game simply just changed a number of things, and in any case, I think it actually hurt the franchise. But again, this was clearly the example of what Konami wants to do with this franchise. They want to basically tear this thing apart and ruin it, and yeah, that's why I still do not officially consider it canon in the official Metal Gear storyline. Next question comes from Marcus Reinen, and you want to know, what was the most painful X-ray in both Mortal Kombat 9 and 10? Let's see. By the way, if you guys are hearing noises, because someone's moving upstairs. I don't know. I guess one of the painful ones, I think it was in Mortal Kombat 9. I think, I don't know, like Sub-Zero did something where I guess he smashed somebody's head with his head, and then he reached his hand inside their bodies and maybe froze one of their intestines, one of their like livers or organs, and froze it and crushed it. I thought that was pretty bad. And I think in Mortal Kombat 10, I think there was one X-ray where, I don't know who it was. It might have been Johnny Cage, it might have been someone else, where apparently they punched someone so hard in the groin that if you were punching a guy character, you literally saw their testicles explode. That was just painful to look at. So I guess in terms of X-rays, those would be the 2 that really stand out the most to me. Next question comes from the Immortal Super Being. You want to know, do I think the rule of 2 hindered the expansion of the Sith Order or made it survive? Basically, from what I've read, the whole point of the rule of 2 was to prevent the infighting. The biggest problem that the Sith of the old order had was that there was so much infighting that they could never truly operate as a collected unit. There was always civil war. Someone was always overthrowing someone. Just at the point where the Sith were winning, someone said, you know, this is a good time for me to, screw over the Master's plan. Like, at no point could they ever truly operate. And so the whole point of the rule of 2 was to make sure that you had only 2 Sith, and so one screwing another was bad, and they had to work together. Now the whole thing behind why it was so conflicting was because the Master had to train the apprentice, and it was the apprentice's job to take out the Master, but he had to do it on their own to prove that they were worthy of being Master. And so the Master who was killed knew that their apprentice would continue the line because they had proven that they were better than they were. And so it was a continued chain of improving Masters. I personally think that there's a couple of issues with that personally, especially when you get to Palpatine and Vader, because Vader was never strong enough on his own to ever take down Sidious. And Sidious knew that, and so I think Sidious was probably the first person at that point who kind of negated that, because he knew that at no point could Vader ever be strong enough to take him down. And then when you go past that, then you have Darth Krayt with the one Sith, and that's a whole other thing. But I think it had its advantages but disadvantages too. Next question comes from All-Star Gamerpunk, and you want to know, how different do I think the landscape of gaming would have been if the deal between Sony and Nintendo had carried through and the Nintendo PlayStation became a brand that survived to today? Number one, I think had that gone through, number one, I think that would have been terrible. Because I think, well, when you, it's hard to imagine that, because had that gone through, that is a lot of really great games that never would have been created. I think that Sega might have still been a thing. Microsoft still would have been completed, but just thinking about that, I think it would have been bad. I think it would have been bad. There's just too many, like, when you look at what PlayStation has become now, that's just way too many franchises that just would never have existed. And man, the gaming would be a completely different thing. I mean, it's so imagine what one bad deal did. But yeah, I certainly believe that, but as I've stated many times, I think the biggest problem is that there's just so many great franchises. There's a mentality that Sony has been able to carry on throughout its entire run through, when you go back all the way to the PlayStation X to now, that Nintendo just simply doesn't follow. And Microsoft does not have the right enough people to come up with that kind of content. There is something that Sony has consistently been able to do better than the Nintendo and the Xbox to this day. And if you take that element out, then I don't think that transfers over to Nintendo, because that's not their mentality. Their mentality is to be experimental. How different can we play these games? How different can we make you guys play our games? It's never been trying to make the best games possible. And though they certainly have had their set of games, I just think that Nintendo consoles are more for children. I know that some adults do get it, but like, believe it or not, I've never actually even seen someone play the newest console in person. I've never even seen that, so it can't be as popular as they like to project it to be. But yeah, that's just how I think it would, how gaming, the landscape of gaming might have changed. Next question comes from Roy Mustang. You want to know, is there any ability or superpower that I think is pointless? Yeah, I think the ability to be invisible is pointless. I mean, yes, being invisible, it's only useful in terms of stealth means, but you know, if you're invisible all the time, I mean, people are going to be bumping into you all the time, and you won't really be able to get through a lot of places very easily. And there's a number of fail-safes that you can do to stop someone who's invisible. So yeah, I don't think that one's really all that interesting. Next question comes from Silver Lionheart 2099. You want to know, what are my top 7 favorite Sith Lords? 7's a bit too much, so I'll drop it down to 3. My top 3 are Darth Krayt, Darth Krayt, and Darth Sidious. I would say those are my 3 favorite Sith Lords of all time. Next question comes from the Batman of Neo Gotham. You want to know, what are my personal top 5 favorite movies ever in my opinion? 5 is a little much. I think be like Inception, Dark Knight, Terminator 2, maybe Star Wars Episode 3, and Gladiator. Just off the top of my head. And the next question is 2 questions from the Hunter Bros. You want to know, which charge gun from DMC do I think is better, Nightmare or Artemis? I'm a bigger fan of Artemis. And the last question is, what are my thoughts on the Fiend Arena in Final Fantasy X-2? I think it's a good place to level grind. It's not all that tough once you know what to do. And with that, those are all the questions that you guys have sent me for this particular episode. I'd like to thank all of you for sending your questions in. If you guys have any more questions you'd like me to answer in next week's episode, be sure to type them in the comments down below, but make sure you get them into me before next Wednesday, preferably around noon, before I start recording the next episode. And like always, thank you guys for watching. You're awesome, and I will see you next time.